All right. Here we go. All right. I have a limited range of motion, but there is none whatsoever, but this is great. This is going to be fun. I can do this. I can do this. We're all good. No worries. This is perfectly fine. We're good. No, I'm good. I'm good. All right. Hi, everybody. So my name is Ned. I'm with Barbizon Lighting Company out of Chicago. So we're many things. Reseller, systems integrator, everything from a roll of gaff tape and a sheet of gel. Again, that's becoming less and less common, to individual fixtures like these, to full system build-outs. So, you know, replacing the entire control guts and lighting and thinky bits of a studio with a modern system. We kind of do all of that. I brought here a few things. Again, the idea of this particular session is talking about location lighting and talking about improving lighting in the field. So I have a few things here that are geared towards that I want to talk about very quickly. This is a relatively short class. I think what's going to be the most valuable for a group of people is for me to answer questions that anybody has about lighting. If anybody has, and the more specific, the better. That gives me the most opportunity to completely give a wrong answer. Generalities I can sort of talk around, but if you have a specific use case, I can absolutely fail you. Or I can give you valuable advice. So somewhere in the middle, we should be great. So these three and this little guy here are some new fixtures that relatively new in location lighting, and I just wanted to quickly sort of talk through them. The idea with all of these is that there's no cable. There's no running power. These all have a built-in battery. That one I've just hanging a battery off the bottom here. But in terms of, you know, if you need a unit that is weatherproof, can just sit out in the rain, delivers a good amount of output, all of these are variable color. So I can do RGB, I can do warm white, I can do cool white, and that's all built into the unit. And I can control these three just through a smartphone. So I will try a couple out here for a moment. And again, just in terms of how everything works. If this comes on way too bright, I apologize. And now the fun part where you get to watch a stranger playing with his phone. Kind of thing, there's always a little bit of setup time, and then the operation is fairly seamless. So I'll start with the cool one, coolest one. They all have their use case, but this one is the one that has the most bells and the most whistles. So this is the Titan tube from Astera, and it has 16 zones across the face. So you can think about zones like really big pixels, if you think about a light as a really big screen. So I'm just doing a slow chase across the front here. This is what I would call a demo mode. It's really cool to look at in this situation. I can't think of a use case for this. I have no idea why any of you would want this, but it can do it. It can also do much more useful things. So if I wanted to just go into a fixed color world, let's say one color, and that color is going to be 3200. It'll wipe up from the bottom. Again, this fixture was designed, everything from Astera was designed as a live event instrument first. So it's going to do a lot of things. In theater and in event lighting, we talk about live moves. So if you have a moving light that pans across the stage from point A to point B, you also want it to look nice in the middle, right? Because the audience is there, they're involved. So everything with this, it's going to sort of slowly fade into or dissolve into the look that you need it to give, just so if you have somebody, an audience member in the space, it gives you that pleasant transition. But this is 3200, I can go to a 2700, I could go to fully saturate green. And again, it's all just directly controlled over Bluetooth. I can put multiple of these together. So this is a standard unit. I can also get up to 8. You can put 4 of them into a KinoFlow old coroplast housing, and now you have a much more robust fixture than a fluorescent where you had to manually change out glass, vacuum sealed things to change the color temperature. That's where this thing came from, right? You were looking at a Kino flow tube and you said, what else could this do? It can now do all of this. Built in, so this is completely waterproof, and that's weather, not dunking. This is nothing I'm talking about here goes in the water, but this can get rained on. Maximum battery life is 30 hours. So if you need something, say again, sorry? So this particular tube is about $850. There's a similar product. There are a lot of similar products that are more cost effective with fewer feature sets. So if you like the weatherproofing but you don't care about the pixels, great, let's make one that does that. If you like the pixels but you don't need the battery life, okay, we can have a thing. There's about 7 different versions of this. I just brought the Cadillac because I had the Cadillac. A little smaller. So this one, I'm a really big fan of. This one's kind of brand new. This is from a company called Roscoe. They've been around for a long time. They used to just make gel. Now they also make this. So this is called the DMG Dash, and it is not connected to my phone at the moment. It's on. It's on, it's just not quite doing what I want it to. I usually say when I'm giving lighting control classes that Bluetooth is not like a real option for lighting control, and this is all why. Bluetooth is great for set it and forget it kind of looks, everything we're talking about here, right? I want to put the tube in the corner and it's going to be green, and that's wonderful. I need to make a couple of changes, great. If I want something where I am doing a live move in a camera setting where, all right, this light is going to change color temperature during the shot, there are other lighting protocols that will not fail on you, like a set of Bluetooth headphones, because that's the same protocol, right? It's coming out of the phone, it's going into the light. I love it for demos, I love it for certain applications, but there are places where it fails. So if I go back to this, I can bring the intensity up. Let's just bring it up to full. So this is a nice little on-camera light. I mentioned to someone earlier, this is sort of the great-great-great-grandchild of the Lowell blender, for those of you that are familiar with that particular unit. That was a built-in battery, variable color fixture. This, again, is it's not just variable white. It can do any number of fully saturated colors. The front piece is actually magnetic, so I can pop off that dome and then go into a harder light look, or it actually comes with a number of just gobo accessories on the front. If you just need a textured light push in the back, the thing where we used to take Fresnel into a silk, into a cookie with some additional frost onto it to make the background kind of have some texture, this one light can produce a similar effect on the background. To answer your question, this one's $400. So the battery life on this one is closer to 3-4 hours. It is not. This one takes the cake in terms of longevity of battery life, absolutely.
How long does it start in?
That's a good question. So the fixture is designed to cut off before the battery reaches a low point that would cause basically they're underdriving the LEDs. So there's a power supply and there's components inside that could make it much brighter, but when the battery went below a certain point, you would start to see that failure. So they're underdriving the LEDs so that failure point is also when they consider the battery to be dead. We do that a lot these days, actually, because the way that power supplies fail is the same way that batteries fail. So we want to underdrive LEDs because it expands the life of the LED unit. The emitter itself lasts longer, and then you can also expand the life of your power supply if you're not absolutely cooking the thing. This one I have to do like this again. So this is the Biflex from a company called Aladdin. There is no app for this one, but what I like about it in terms of just use case. So again, it's very much sort of a standard 1x1 shape, think light panels Astra, 1x1, anything like that. But all of that is because of this frame that it's on. So it's completely flexible. It weighs next to nothing. And this piece of it is also completely weather safe. So you take this part of it, tape it to the wall outside, let it sit in the rain for a while. The power supply itself needs to be protected. The battery needs to be protected. But if you've got a remote, if you want to just shove something into a car, if you need a little bit of fill light, it's got Velcro on the back. This is real in terms of versatility. This can do a lot of things. Fully roll it up, put it inside a China ball. There's a lot of, now it's a 360 or a 360 source that is again fully bicolor, fully dimmable. I'm just running it on an Anton Bauer, so a camera battery. So there are the Anton Bauer is far and away the heaviest part of this rig. So if you had a smaller gold mount battery, you could make this a much, much lighter weight rig. It could kind of go on anything. Again, on this little tiny kit stand, the Anton Bauer basically works like a sandbag, so it works out. And then the last one I wanted to talk about is this little bulb-looking thing. This is from a company called Aperture, and they make a lot of things. Aputure. Yes, it is not the right spelling, but it is the one they've gone with. Helps with the SEO optimization if you spell your name wrong. So this is another built-in battery fixture. What I really like, this is a $70 light. They have a couple of $40 units. They are really, really budget focused, and they're really focused on bringing as much value as they can for, I'm really used to being somebody who sells lights. People send me lights all the time and say, hey, this is really cheap, sell it to your customers. And I turn it on and I say, the light looks like garbage. It's cheap, but nobody wants it. This is a really nice quality light. It's a nice quality of white light. So, this is a bulb form factor. It has a socket on the back. You can just put it into, China ball, triolet, anything like that. Or you can just have it floating. There's a battery built in as well. So a lot of different options. They make a panel size. So this is far and away their smallest fixture. They have a couple of panel sized ones that are, again, everything's internal battery. And then all the way up to a full size. They have a 1200 watt LED, not a 1200 watt equivalent, a 1200 watt LED. So 1200 watts of power driving the unit. That is about equivalent to an M40 HMI for those of you that have done sort of big rig exterior work. It's that one, but that one's only $3,000 in terms of, an HMI costs 16 grand brand new. So Aperture is really, you hear the word disrupting a lot, which drives me insane, but they're really doing, they're driving down the price while maintaining quality, which is kind of amazing. So these are the things that I have with me. I would love to talk some specifics. Biflex price. There is a wireless DMX version and a non-wireless DMX version. I want to say the non-wireless DMX version is $1,150 for a kit. I will put a full document together with all of these, and I'll send it around, so it's a reference. Other questions about the stuff here, or just if people have lighting things in general they want to get into? I can just keep talking for the entire time. I have no problem with that whatsoever, but I'm a salesperson. I do that all the time anyway. So, all right, I'll keep going. So the cool thing for me about a lot of these is the multi-level control idea. So everything here is Bluetooth, or the things that are wireless enabled are Bluetooth enabled. They are also wireless DMX enabled. So if you have what I would call a pro level system. So if your current studio is using a DMX board or faders, all of these wireless instruments can also be integrated into that kind of wireless control. It's not a given. You can get Bluetooth things that don't take wireless DMX, but all of these do for more robust, everything I was talking about wireless headphones failing, right? DMX doesn't have that problem. DMX is a show-ready protocol that is more able to deal with the things that Bluetooth can't. So you can put any of these into a system, and they can do both. So if you need to have a remote crew that's got Bluetooth as the control option, if the Roscoe Dash is acting as an on-camera light, all right, you don't need a DMX system for that. But if you have it brought back into the studio and now you need to be slowly changing colors over the course of a broadcast, we can bring it in and it works in both worlds. That is something we're starting to see more and more, where there is equipment that works for both lower budget and higher budget control systems in the same unit. You're not having to specify basically what level of fixture you need out of the box. It's exciting for me as somebody who builds and designs systems, because I can say, all right, let's start you off with the Bluetooth, see how that works, and then start developing out the rest of the system around it, start bringing in the wireless DMX control for the things that can only take that, and then we get to a place where the whole studio is wireless, which is, it's good fun, because then everything can travel around and it's all based off of one control surface. We are starting to see a lot more of these being used because of that flexibility. So Titan, right now in sort of television production, narrative television especially, Titan Tube kind of reigns supreme, because you can gaff tape it to a wall and then there's your light for that part of the space. You can, I've got it on a little C-stand here, but it really needs almost nothing. It's got some rigging points up top in terms of, you can put a screw eye on it, you can hang it, you can stand it up. So a lot of these are plenty of things were sort of designed as concepts. Like, I wonder if we can make a light that does this. And I see a lot of those, and those are never great. But a lot of these are starting to be adopted, and they're getting feedback. A lot of these are second generation, third generation versions of these things. So even as the price points keep kind of going down on some of these things, they are tested, they're being abused by productions in the field, and then when the new version comes out, it tries to address as many of those claims as possible. Yes, sir.
Over the years, obviously, I'm sure a lot of us have seen a lot of different changes in lighting, but I'm not like professionals in it. So, like, what do you recommend you look for to avoid buying something super cheap? Because, it looks really cheap. It looks nice when I look at it, but then later on, it doesn't. Like, what should we be looking for when we start buying lights?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. In terms of, there's a few things that only professional level lights are going to give you. So color rendition is a big thing with LEDs in particular. With tungsten, it used to not matter. Tungsten, because the lamp came from one place and the people that made the light came from another place. So as long as you had a good lamp in it, you could get a cheaper fixture and it would look the same. It would render fine on skin tones. Starting with fluorescent, we started to get issues where different bulbs would give different skin tones. Essentially, you'd start to see green, or you'd start to see colors that even with the eye you would start to see them, and then on camera you would definitely start to see them. So there are a few different metrics for measuring the quality of light. The earliest is called the Color Rendition Index, which is CRI. That was designed for fluorescence. A lot of companies say it's not useful, say that it's not, it's not enough, but it's a really good place to start with, and you're going to have the most lights that have that rating. So a good CRI is in the high 90s at this point. There are other 3-4 letter initialisms, TLCI, SSI, that all basically mean the same thing, but looking for a quality of light is really good. Looking and seeing if there is a domestic or local reseller who distributes the gear. And I am incredibly biased when I say that, because I am a local reseller who distributes gear, but the important part of that is that I am able to service this stuff. So if you purchase something and it goes absolutely sideways, you have a recourse to go to that person and say, hey, I bought this and it doesn't work anymore. explain yourself. A lot of things will carry warranties, but they're not all inclusive. So emitter failures will be covered for a certain part of the warranty, but physical damage isn't covered at all. So if you drop the light, it's not, that level of thing. So finding a reseller partner that you're able to have a candid conversation with is always good when possible. And then just see if other people are using it. Something that is really, really cheap doesn't have to be bad. It just needs to be tested, and you need to see, all right, how long has the company been around? Has the product been around long enough to fail? Because that sometimes isn't, with really, really new product or really new companies, they've only been around for 2 years, so nobody knows how long the emitters will last, because an LED will run 2 or 3 years before it starts to see a decrease in output continuously. It's 50,000 hours. So if the company's so new that nobody's done the stress testing on the fixtures, it's all worth considering. Yeah, that's a list of things. It can, yeah. So I can all I have to do is there's 3 buttons on here, kind of like an old school Google phone. Press them in a certain there's basically a couple of sequences printed on the side. Press these 2 together, it'll do this, these 3. So I can change it from DC to AC mode and then pop it into a socket. The nice thing about that is that charges the battery while it's shining. So you're using the light, you're charging the battery, and then if you need to, you just pull it out of the socket and you keep using it. So again, this thing is really robust. I have dropped this exact unit several times, and it works really well.
What's the rating for slow motion? I know LEDs obviously flicker. Some LEDs flicker with normal motion.
Right.
Definitely not in this room, but what do you look for when you're looking at the specs for that?
So if you're shooting off speed regularly, that kind of becomes the most important thing, because the way the LEDs change their intensity is by flickering really, really fast. The way that it's driven, you can't just, like with a tungsten light, we used to just be able to put it on a dimmer and dim it, and the light stayed the same except it was less bright. With LEDs, they are flickering on and off incredibly quickly, and our eyes perceive that as a less bright light. Cameras, of course, can see things incredibly quickly. Certain cameras, if you get into the phantom world where you're talking 1,000 frames per second or more, there are certain units that can do that. Most can't.
The biggest things this camera will do like 120.
Sure.
And so there'll be some LEDs like in our office when we tested it, flickered like crazy. But that's just overhead light.
Yeah.
Our aperture, like something geared towards video production, the camera would be.
It's not a given. It should be, but it's not a given.
I looked in the specs, I can never find. Is it called the speckle rate? Like what is even the definition?
So you can look at the refresh rate, and some lights will let you set that manually. So refresh rate is measured in hertz, and you can adjust that as appropriate. That'll get you some, it's kind of back to the old days of magnetic ballasts on HMIs where you had to be shooting within a certain range or else they would flicker. One thing you can do that's always helpful is put the LED on full. So if it's a dimmable fixture like one of these where you're adjusting the intensity, if it's parked all the way up, it's going to flicker a lot less. So if you're shooting slightly off speed, if you're shooting 60 or 120, just parking it up at full and backing it off is going to work better than dimming it down to 50 if that's the lighting situation. But testing it always, and that's again just sort of to your point about figuring out what to get, testing it, seeing with your specific rig, with your specific use case, does the light actually function? Because there's plenty of a lot of lighting manufacturers will advertise their stuff as sort of a multi-tool, as a Swiss Army knife, and that's almost never the case. I would say that there is no one light that is going to work for everybody. So even though you've heard great things about the RA Sky panel, it weighs 45 pounds and it costs $6,500. So is that useful for what you're doing? So test it, get your hands on it as much as you possibly can. I am the child of 2 literature professors, so I can just sit and look at at a classroom and wait for somebody to ask a question, but I'll keep talking. So I mentioned briefly with the Biflex, it's powered off of a camera battery. That is the other thing that is becoming more and more standard. So the nice thing about LEDs is the way they draw power is very similar to the way that cameras draw power. So now we're able to, if something doesn't have a built-in battery like these two, which are still very much the exception, it is more and more common to be able to get something like a 6x Astra or even a smaller KinoFlow product, something that will take that camera battery, and then you have that option of something that was only a studio fixture now has the flexibility to become a field fixture. The main concern then just becomes weight. How much do you want to be taking with you out into the world? How much can you be packing in with you? If you're flying, of course, batteries become a real issue for if you're bringing batteries on a plane is a problem, as I'm sure those of you on the camera side have run into. So there are. It becomes another consideration that the flexibility doesn't come for free. You have to. There are things that sort of crop up as you start dealing with more DC powered units that you sort of have to start taking into effect. I spoke a little bit too about the pixelization on the Titan tube. Other than it just being something pretty that people can use, you can actually use it to make a smaller fixture, right? So if this is a 4-foot tube. If I've got all the pixels turned on, it's a 4-foot tube. If I have half the pixels turned on, then it's a 2-foot tube. So if I only need this much light, and otherwise I'm going to be spilling past whatever I'm shooting at, if you have an option for a pixelized surface, then you can just only use the chunk. And again, you can divide this into 16 pieces. So if you only need the middle bit, then you can just use the middle bit. I mean, there's kind of no limit on what you can do. I actually, I have a couple of studios that have a few of these rigged up, and they use them as backlights, and they just chunk out. They have a few hung up. They just say, all right, this little bit, and this little bit, those will be the backlights. Everything else is dark, and that lets them get better control over. Because the thing about everything that looks like this, right? Every tube, everything with a soft face, everything with diffusion on the front. When the light turns on, the light goes everywhere. We're used to older Fresnel fixtures where you could sort of crank in that zoom and the cone of the light coming out the front would change shape. A really, really wide Fresnel was about 50 degrees. All of these have a beam angle over 100 degrees. So it's wider than 90. It just goes everywhere automatically. And so the more that you're able to do, so there's lighting control in terms of I can make the light blue from my phone. There's also lighting control in terms of egg crates, in terms of barn doors. Those have started to become much, much more important because the light by default goes everywhere. It used to be it was hard to get a big space lit. Now the hard part is, all right, I only want the light to go here. So the more tools, so when you get a tube like this, getting a set of fabric egg crates that go, there's really not a better way for me to describe what those are. Just imagine a cardboard egg crate with holes cut in the bottom. So it's just little squares that go in the front of this that will keep the light from spilling everywhere. So the individual squares kind of dial it in a little bit. So you still get, the idea with all of these is that they look good on skin right away. You don't have to put them through diffusion. You don't have to bounce them off of something for them to look nice on talent. But you still have to control in that light. The old, Kino Divas always came with the metal crate on the front of them. That is a knowing look of someone that has dealt with a lot of. Those things melted like crazy. I remember I worked in student rental before I worked at Barbizon, and you would have people that didn't know what the egg crate was for, pointed the light straight up in the air and just sort of left it. They were doing a ceiling bounce with a Kino, and they left the egg crate on. And fluorescents don't get hot, but those were plastic little grids on the face, and so they'd come back and it was just all liquid, just all distorted, like some sort of Dali painting. It was great. It was great. Rental's a trip for those of you that haven't had the experience. I will pause dramatically and ask for questions.
does that function? If we already have a system with DMX, do we need a gateway or?
So basically, wireless DMX really does work like DMX without the wires, which sounds like a tautology, but it's really not. There are plenty of wireless systems where, wireless audio comes to mind where it really doesn't. It's not that clean. With wireless DMX, really all you have to do is pop a transmitter at the end of the line.
Okay.
So if you've got some sort of opti, even if you just have one run, but they're all daisy chained, you can just pop a transmitter at the end of that line, and then.
So that transmitter gets me access to all of this stuff.
Yep. So the one sort of caveat with that is that there are multiple languages of wireless DMX. So they all work, but they don't all talk to each other. So it's just a question of figuring out, all right, which units are we talking about? What do we want to be able to control? All right, so this is the flavor of wireless DMX that we'll be putting into the room. It's robust. It's come a long way in terms of being able to deal with line of sight, being able to deal with distance. It is still a very dense wireless. It takes up a lot of bandwidth because DMX lighting control protocol, it was created for theater initially. It was created for dimmers in theaters to run old tungsten lights, and it sends a signal to control 512 bits of information. And the beginning of that was 512 dimmers, which we thought we're never going to get to 512 dimmers. How could you even? And we're way past that now. But the way that it was written that we haven't ever changed, that it sends out that command, all 512 commands, 44 times a second. It says 1 do this, 2 do this, 3 do this, all the way up. And if everything is at 0 except for 1, it still says 2 at 0, 3 at 0, 4 at 0, all the way up. Okay, one more time. Okay, one more time. 44 times a second. So wireless DMX just does that, but wirelessly. So it's very, very heavy.
So how many channels? Are they channels or what do you call
It's
them?
channels, yeah.
Okay.
So
If you've got brightness and then color, so do certain fixtures use multiple channels?
yes. So if you're thinking old, again, the old tungsten unit, that's one channel. It's intensity. This, I've got red, green, blue, white emitters, and I've got 16 of them on the face. And I also have intensity. So I think it's the most it can do is that times 2 because it's 16-bit dimming. So I think this one has 160 channels on the face of it. You can get, fan control is now a DMX attribute. So if you need it, if there's a silent moment in a broadcast where you need to be able to control your fan noise, you can bring all that down if you've got lights that are actively cooled. That's why we're so far past 512 now. If it was all dimmers, okay, most of us don't need 512 lights, but I was at NAB a few weeks ago, and there's a 8-foot version of this that has 480 channels per tube. So that's a universe right there. If you want to have a rig of them, you have to run data straight to it. You cannot do it with traditional DMX. One thing you can start getting into, and this is away from DMX, but just while we're talking about it, you can start talking about these as screens. So you can start mapping video content to your lighting rig. Because again, this is 16 pixels. There's no need to not think of those as 16 pixels as part of a larger video build. So we're starting to see a lot more of that, especially with virtual production. If you're integrating video walls or green screen components into a set, then the same video that you're pushing to your volume wall, you've got the LED behind you with some sort of ambient video, that same video can get pushed to these tubes. And then you're integrating the subject into that environment because, for some reason the example they show is always a fire. I don't know why it's never anything nice, but it's always, there's some huge thing burning down in the background, the actor's standing there, and then there's more fire coming at them through the tubes. You could imagine what that would look like for a beach, but I guess the fire is more dramatic. But, even for something as simple as a green screen, if you want to sell the effect a little bit more, it's a pretty simple idea to just push whatever video content is going to be on the green screen into a couple of tubes that are hitting the talent. And then when you get to it in post and swap it in, you get more seamless integration with that composite. And that's all, everything is about virtual production right now in terms of what new products is going to come out on the lighting side in the next 12, 36 months. It's all going to be about virtual production. It's all going to be about LED screens and figuring out what the economical solution is for an LED screen, because a full-size volume is not something that most of us will have access to, but it is an incredible storytelling tool. It is an incredibly versatile space. You know, there's a couple of stages in Chicago that they shoot everything from commercials to documentaries, because it's cheaper to work in one of those stages than to, now the ethics of shooting a documentary in a green screen, you know, but there's reasons for it. The logistics of it are so much cheaper, and so being able to find an affordable way to get stuff like this, lighting solutions and also video wall solutions that integrate together everywhere, is something that's going to be the new downward pressure. That's going to be, let's make a cheap version of this so that a lot more people can get their hands, like what it was with green screen. It used to be that green screen was an incredibly difficult process to do, and now it's much more accessible, and I'm sure a lot of you are using it.
Would that, when you talk about with the video integration, would that be, could that be used as from like a stage perspective? So, for example, if you got a production on a stage, if the throw is strong enough, then you'd be able to see that.
So probably, I mean, yes and no. I don't know that I could use these particular tubes in a stage. I mean,
Not a very large one, it's typically just
yeah, like a small, like I've used Kino Flows as, you know, the old fluorescent version of this as sort of a front light in a proscenium space. You can fly those up there and you get enough of a soft push. But the idea of that video mapping isn't just limited to lights that have multiple pixels. So if I have a rig of lights, I can treat each of those as an individual pixel and then push, you know, it's a very fast way to design a sort of weird color show out of a rig of fixtures. It's just to push a, you know, basically a screensaver or some sort of generic color pattern to it, and then the lights will interface with that and you'll get that effect sort of throwing. They're doing that a lot in larger productions, like they'll have the wash light that gives the sort of ambience, and then they'll also include moving lights and things that are a lot more narrow just to throw that color. You know, you see those sort of saturate pinks and greens in the Marvel movies. They're throwing those with extremely big multiple color fixtures, RGB movers and stuff, so that, again, you're talking about integrating that look across the entire shooting area, whatever the volume of that happens to be. I actually don't know when I'm done. I realized 3:15. All right, so I have 3 more minutes. I can take between 1 and 7 more questions, depending on how people are feeling.
Could you just walk through the light name and modeling?
Yeah, sure. So this is called the Titan tube. It is from a company called Astera. This is the 1 meter Titan, so they're a German company, so forgive me. The 1 meter, there is a 1/2 meter, and there's also a 2 meter. So this is built-in battery, it's fully weather safe, it's wireless DMX, and it's multiple zones of control. It's also Bluetooth. So everything I've talked about in one. Here in front of me and on the ground unceremoniously is the Aladdin Biflex. This is the 1x1 non-wireless DMX. There is also a 1x1 wireless DMX. There's a 1x2, and there is a 1x that is full color. So if we just want to do, again, if you want to have the flexible option, but you need it to be purple, the option is there. This is, I don't actually think I said the name of this light. This is the B7C from Aperture. They're great at a lot of things, naming products, maybe not. But they also have the MC, I've been told it's called that because it's the size of a MasterCard. I genuinely don't know if that's why they called it that, but it's a tiny little panel. It's battery controlled. It can do all the things that this can do. And then that is the Roscoe DMG Dash. So built-in battery, wireless control. Also weatherproof, actually. The only thing I have with me that isn't weather safe is this light that's full of holes for relatively obvious reasons. That is the one that I cannot fully remember. I believe the one I have with me is 1200, but I will double check, and I'll get an email sent out with that info on it. Yeah, so again, my name's Ned. I've been with Barbizon for 7 years. I do lighting specification and sales out of Chicago, but I support the entire Midwest. It's a small office, but we travel as much as we can these days. If you have questions about anything, again, I've got a stack of the electrician's handbooks here, which are totally free. Those are just great reference guides for all sorts of things. And then I've also got a stack of business cards if anybody has any particular questions. I'm also happy to hang out for a little bit after the fact if anybody wants to ask a question that the whole room didn't need to overhear. So thank you all so much. This has been great fun. It's good to be back doing these things in person. Zoom is terrible. All right. Thanks, everybody.